Hey, everybody. I'm Jennifer Huntington, owner of Learning RX in Cary, North Carolina. I'm coming to you from Cary live today. I've got my husband, Greg, in the background. He's going to be taking care of letting everybody in. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can certainly send him a message in the chat. If you have questions as we go through this, as many of you will, at the very end, I will give you instructions on how to reach out to me to get those questions best answered. But without further ado, I'm going to start. I want to thank you all for your time this evening that we're going to spend together. If you have one of your child's reports, you might want to have that out and take some notes. I'll try not to go too fast because we do have a lot to cover. But this is the educational portion of the Gibson Grant for the North Carolina homeschool educators. So thanks for doing the first step already. The first step of a two-part process is to have your student take the assessment. So you should have done that by now. If you did not receive your report for some reason, please send us an email and we will follow up and make sure to get that to you. Again, I'm Jennifer Huntington, and my husband and I own Learning RX here in the Raleigh area, and we are a cognitive one-on-one brain training company. But today I want to talk to you about the Gibson test itself, about cognitive skills and the importance of knowing more about your brain skills, and help you understand how to interpret the report that you have. So what's the deal with this grant anyway? Well, Learning RX is an expert on cognitive skills for learning in the brain. We were grounded in years of cognitive research and results, and our methodology has been around for more than 35 years, and we've graduated over 110,000 students, which makes us an expert on neuroplasticity and change in the brain. So we look at how the brain processes information in order to use it to learn, to remember, read, pay attention, and solve problems. We develop an individualized one-on-one training program for each client, which targets and strengthens weak cognitive skills that may be getting in the way of learning success. We deliver this both in person and remotely. So my husband Greg and I, we own the local Learning RX centers here in Raleigh and Cary, and we have been serving North Carolina for more than 18 years. Being parents of a neurodiverse child ourselves and having homeschooled for a bit, we have decided that sharing this knowledge with the homeschool community is really valuable because you all are so intimately involved with your students' education. So you're going to make good use of this information. We want to thank the North Carolina homeschool educators for partnering with us to help get the word out by allowing us this opportunity to meet and share with you this important information. So I mentioned we have two kids. These are our children. Our daughter's 14 and our son is 18. And this is a picture taken on the first day of school this year. You can just look at their faces and see the joy exuded by how excited they are to go to their first day of school. But the point is, they both learn and perform completely differently. So our daughter is really super fast. She has a very fast processing speed and a really strong long-term memory. So she's able to process information super fast and retain it the first time she hears it, which really looks like she doesn't have a lot of homework, which really can be annoying to her brother, because he, on the other hand, processes a lot more slowly than she does. He's been known to take a long time to get through homework, in spite of the fact that he's a high-achieving student. In elementary school, he struggled to keep up with the pace the teacher set in the classroom and would miss important information. So in essence, I was homeschooling even when he was in traditional school because we would spend hours every afternoon after school just reteaching him what he missed all day long. After his second grade teacher suggested we homeschool for third grade, we knew we needed more information in order to know how to help him. So we got his cognitive skills tested. And what we learned was that the primary cause of his attention struggle was rooted in processing speed, or his ability to quickly process information. It was weak. And that was making it difficult for him to focus and pay attention. It was creating a lot of challenges with learning just across the board. But once we were able to understand how he was processing information, so why certain things were easy for him and other things were hard, it really was a game changer for us. It allowed us as parents to adjust our expectations of what he was capable of doing and what he legitimately just struggled to do. This helped us to adjust our teaching approach as well and to know where to begin with an intervention plan for him to help overcome his processing speed struggle. We'd even wondered if he was just being lazy. Maybe he just didn't want to pay attention. He didn't want to learn something. And I have said things to him like, just try harder or stop being lazy. I've said some things, and we thought we were really dealing with a behavior challenge, but we learned we were dealing with a weak cognitive skill. He had a can't. Have you ever wondered why your student may excel in one area of school, but then maybe struggle in another? So I mentioned we did indeed homeschool him for a while. And it was during this time that I found myself asking questions like, am I doing enough for him? How can I teach to his strengths? How do I accommodate the things that are difficult for him to do? Am I using the right curriculum? Am I wasting our time on certain things? What if I've missed something? At times, homeschooling really felt very overwhelming for me. And I questioned a lot about it for myself. Maybe you have a child that isn't struggling so much, but has a high IQ. Maybe they're very fast and very bright. But did you know that many students with high IQs have a learning struggle? And that's because our cognitive skills must work together. And all it takes is one weak cognitive skill to create a learning difference for the student with a high IQ. So, the difference in our brains between what we do automatically or without thinking, that's our cognitive strength, and what our brains struggle to do, that's our cognitive weakness. It's in between these 2 points is where real life symptoms exist. And those symptoms can look like frustration, test anxiety, rigid thinking, poor reading comprehension, maybe struggling with word math, time management, and the list goes on. As educators, we're focused on teaching information to our students. But how often are we focused on how the brain processes information in order to use it? These skills govern everything we do, from academics to sports to getting along with our siblings. So, my goal for you today is to equip you with information on cognitive skills to help you understand your students' cognitive strengths and weaknesses, and to be able to best interpret and utilize your students' Gibson test results. First, we're going to talk about cognitive skills, what they are, how do they apply to real life with your kids. Then we will review the Gibson test reports together. And lastly, we will cover how you may want to utilize this information to incorporate it into your homeschool plan. So, what are cognitive skills and why should we test them? So, why test? There are different types of tests that measure different things. Yearly achievement testing measures reading and math knowledge. So it measures the information they've learned over the course of the school year. And as homeschool families, you're familiar with the required annual testing. This test helps you gauge their progress based on their grade level requirements. But what about measuring how they're learning? What kind of learner are they? Visual, auditory, well, that's where our cognitive skills test can help. It tests the skills we utilize when we're learning. So, cognitive testing measures how the brain is processing information. I wanted to mention that cognitive testing is not a replacement for the required end of year achievement testing. So, now let's address what are cognitive skills and how are they different from achievement knowledge. There are two parts to SMART. The first part is knowledge or what you know. This refers to all the accumulated information students learn in school, facts, figures, vocabulary, etc. This knowledge is measured by grades, quizzes, tests, as well as end of year testing. The second part of SMART is your processing ability or how you process that information in order to learn it. The more efficiently your processing skills are working together, the easier learning the content will be. This includes your higher level thinking skills and is measured by IQ, SAT, ACT, and other college entrance tests. With this understanding, let's look at the 7 key cognitive skills that the Gibson test measured. This picture represents how your brain processes information in order to use it. The file cabinet on the right represents your brain. Your brain is constantly processing, storing, and retrieving information all day long. The 7 circles represent our cognitive skills. These skills must work together in order for the process of storing and retrieving information to feel easy. The first 3 green circles represent the doorway to the brain. This door has to be open in order for information to flow in and to flow out. These 3 skills must work together to keep the door open. The 4 purple circles represent our higher level thinking skills. First and foremost, we must be paying attention to the task at hand for information to be able to get into our brain in order for us to process it quickly. If we're not paying attention, then the doorway to our brain is closed and no information gets in or back out. There are 2 primary cognitive skills that contribute to our ability to pay attention, and they are working memory or short term memory and processing speed. Let's take a look at the first key cognitive skill, working memory. Working memory skills are really important for accomplishing small tasks throughout the day. This is your buddy. It goes through the day with you, and it's your brain's ability to hold on to just a few pieces of information long enough to do something with it. It only lasts about 20 to 30 seconds. So in real life, it would look like you saying to your kids, get your book bag, get your coat, put on your shoes, grab your lunchbox, we gotta go. If they can do that, then chances are their working memory is pretty good. However, if you find yourself repeating instructions or perhaps only giving one instruction at a time, it may be pointing to working memory not being strong enough to hold on to everything you just said. And at the end of the day, if working memory is weak, it's going to look like they simply aren't paying attention. Working memory is also important when it comes to learning to read and learning to do math in your head. The other part of the doorway to the brain is processing speed. So, processing speed is how quickly your brain can process information. So, it's concerned with the pace and the volume of information coming at you. So, it's your brain's ability to process information to help you understand information. It will affect one's ability to keep up with the pace of conversation, like at work, or keep up with the teacher in the classroom. How fast is information being delivered in the classroom? If processing speed is weak, the student will typically only catch part of what is being said, which means one major symptom of processing speed being weak is missing information. So, if this is indeed the case, it can also appear that the student simply isn't paying attention. Weak processing speed also affects your ability to have effective time management. So, when this is weak, it can indeed be difficult for someone to feel time passing accurately. So, perhaps 15 minutes and 30 minutes might feel the same for that person. They have no idea how long that it's been taking them to sit and do their homework or read a chapter in a book. And this can make being able to prioritize tasks from homework to getting ready for bed difficult and time consuming. So think of this like when you're trying to download software onto your laptop and you get that annoying spinning wheel on your computer, right? Your computer's buffering, it's trying to process and keep up. So that's a great picture of weak processing skill speed in the brain. There's buffering going on. So weak processing speed can also affect reading and math fluency. So anytime you hear the word fluency, that really means how fast can your brain read or how fast can your brain do mental math. So does your child struggle with time math drills? Do they read slowly? Do they run out of time for tests? Well, processing speed may be a contributing factor. Also, because processing speed is part of the doorway to the brain, if it's moving slowly, not everything gets in. That person can miss a lot about what's going on around them in the moment. They may appear like they're really locked in their own world sometimes, and this can affect their awareness. So, as you can see, all three of these skills must work together for the doorway to the brain to be open. If either working memory or processing speed is weak, it can indeed make it difficult to focus, and therefore it can look like an attention struggle when really it may truly be because of a weak cognitive skill. So now let's look at the higher level thinking skills. Logic and reasoning is an important skill for forming concepts and problem solving. This is your brain's ability to understand the end goal. What are you trying to achieve? And then the first step and the subsequent series of steps needed to reach the goal. So this skill directly impacts things like planning, organizing, using strategy, and problem solving. Academically, it will directly impact math, especially math that requires multiple steps. As soon as our students learn double digit multiplication or long division, there's a series of steps that you need to follow, and you need logic to do so. In real life, logic and reasoning can look like a person's ability to understand the bigger picture of what is going on around them. How is what they are doing in the moment affecting others? So if it's weak, this may also contribute to their difficulty with correlating actions and outcomes. If I do this, that will happen. It can also cause a lot of frustration in real life. So think of it this way. If my logic is weak, then I don't know what I don't know. So perhaps by default, I feel like I'm right. And the thing that I need in order to understand your perspective, well, that's the skill I am weak at. So it's hard for me to understand what you're trying to explain sometimes. So this person may require a lot of conversations where they need help in order to link concepts or steps together in order to solve problems. If you were to give only one test to measure someone's cognitive intelligence, it would likely be a logic test. Now let's look at long-term memory. So for the purpose of this discussion, what I'm not talking about is your student's ability to think back to their last birthday party or your last family vacation to Disney World and how awesome it was. They could probably tell me all of the details. But that type of memory has an emotional component to it, and that is not what the Gibson test measured. So what it did measure was your student's ability to take in brand new information that they've never seen before. They don't have any context for it. So facts, right, like school, and put it in their mental file cabinet and then get it back out, even just a few minutes later. So what it looks like in real life is their ability to learn new information during class and then remember it long enough to do their homework without you having to reteach it to them or to themselves. Or perhaps studying one night for a test or a quiz, and then being able to remember that information long enough to demonstrate it on the test the next day. So, if long term memory is weak, then what it really looks like is your student having to spend time and repetition with information in order to store it long term in their mental file cabinet. Long term memory skills are important for test taking and recalling facts. And if you have students in elementary school, their only job right now in school, if you think about it, is to remember everything because it's all new. So if your long term memory is weak, what it really means is as time passes, there's like an imaginary hole in their file cabinet and information just drips out over time. They don't hold on to it. And that can feel very frustrating for everyone. Let's talk about auditory processing. So, auditory processing is your brain's ability to decipher between sounds as well as manipulate those sounds. So, I'm not referring to your hearing, but to your brain's ability to distinguish what it hears. So, for instance, if I asked you how many individual sounds you hear in the word blamp, what would you say? Three? Four? Maybe? Well, there's actually five individual sounds in blamp. But then if I asked you to say blamp without the sound, what would you say? Did you say blap? Blap is the answer. So research shows that this is the number one skill needed for strong reading and spelling. But this is not something that is taught in school. Rather, this is a brain skill. This is something that either your brain can do or it struggles to do. So, for example, when a student is first learning their vowel sounds, they need to be able to distinguish between the I, They're all so similar, right? But when a student has weak auditory processing, all of these sounds may sound the same to them in their brain, which leaves them to guess when they begin to read those vowels, as well as to spell them. And guess what? Once a student spells or reads the same word incorrectly several times, they have just taught themselves the wrong way to read or spell it. And this is their way of spelling it, right? It makes sense to them, but it's wrong. And that habit can be difficult to break once it starts. But that is why. This is also an important skill for students when they need to listen to a teacher or a parent. So they actually hear what the teacher says something. It's not about their hearing, but it's their brain then trying to decipher what was said. So some symptoms that come along with this would be, well, what did you say? Huh? Can you repeat that? So that is a symptom of mishearing. So when this skill is weak, also learning a foreign language and writing can be affected. Let's look at the last skill, visual processing. So what I'm not referring to is your vision or your ability to see clearly. So visual processing is your brain's ability to see things visually and spatially inside your head. So visual processing is a needed skill for subjects like math, geography, science, history. It's also very helpful for sports or for someone trying to remember how to get somewhere. So following a map without using GPS. Anyone ever remember doing that? Our kids will never know how to do that, unfortunately. But it's also an important skill for math and reading comprehension. So for math, consider how we start to teach math. Think about preschool and kindergarten. We bring out the blocks, right? We teach and show that two blocks and two blocks makes four blocks. The student can see the blocks for adding, but then we don't keep the blocks out forever, right? We take them away by first or second grade, they're gone. And that's because we assume that that student can see the blocks in their head. But what if they can't? And some can't. Then suddenly adding would be hard. And that is typically when we see the fingers come out because they need to be able to see it to do it. If they can't see it, they have a hard time picturing it themselves. And they get stuck with math pretty quickly. Visual processing is also an important skill for reading comprehension. So This is your brain's ability to create a picture or generate an image in your head out of nothing. So when you're reading, you should see a movie playing in your head about what you're reading. And if you can do this, then your reading comprehension will be stronger. If you can't do this, then you still could be maybe a great reader. Maybe you can decode every word on the page correctly, but it really just becomes the act of simply reading words on a page. It's not fun. It's not your favorite thing to do. You're not connected to what you're reading. It's boring. And so you don't want to do it. And you're going to have to reread and reread for content. So, good reading comprehension requires good visualization of the material being read. So now let's put all of the cognitive skills together to accomplish a task. Are you ready? I want you to feel your brain working with this task, mom and dad, okay? I want you to spell the last name of the first president of the United States backward. Try it. Say it out loud. Could you do it? Are you struggling? So it's Notighnishsaw. Wow, right? I mean, that's an unusual question, but let's walk through that briefly. The first thing you needed to do is to pay attention to what I just said. And I said it quickly on purpose so that you needed to process what I said quickly by using your processing speed. And I asked a multi part question. So you needed to use your working memory to hold on to what I said. Then you needed to know what was your goal and where to start to answer the question using your logic and reasoning. Then you had to remember who the first president was. Hopefully, you said George Washington using your long term memory. Then you needed to be able to spell it. We typically want to spell it forwards, much less backwards, right? And please note that none of the letters in Washington actually say their own name. The W doesn't say W, etc., but all the letters make a sound. So that represents using your auditory processing skill. Then to spell Washington backwards, you need to picture it in your head using your visual processing skill. If you found yourself needing to write it down in order to spell it backwards, this may be a sign that your visual processing is weak. So, as you can see, even if just one of these skills is weak, you may experience a learning challenge. The biggest takeaway from today's presentation is to please remember it only takes one significantly weak skill to hold you back from being able to demonstrate your strengths, especially if that task relies on the skill which happens to be your weakest skill. Hopefully that's making sense. I often hear parents say, me included, about their child that they're just being lazy or they don't want to do it. But what I have learned and want for you to please consider, given your students' results, is that aside from behavior, of course, it may indeed be a weak cognitive skill that you're seeing. Typically, we find that if a student can do something, then, well, they will. If they have a weakness getting in the way, however, they may not be able to explain to you why something is hard. They just know it is hard. So it may indeed look like a behavior symptom when really it may be a weak cognitive skill. Before we move to reviewing the Gibson test together, there are three additional areas the test measured that I need to cover. First, the word attack test was added to look at how well someone can read nonsense words. This skill is important for good reading and spelling, as well as for reading comprehension, and it was not part of the IQ score. The Gibson test also provides an attention cluster measure as well as a composite IQ score. So the attention cluster score is a composite score of both sustained and selective attention. So sustained attention is the brain's ability to mentally stick with something when it feels overwhelming or hard. So it's your brain's mental endurance. And it represents our brain's mental energy to do something we do not enjoy. So we can all typically stay focused on the things we enjoy because Guess what? That's an indication we have a cognitive strength in that area. If it feels easy. However, when something feels hard and it's more difficult, then it's going to be more difficult to maintain our stamina and focus as well. Selective attention is the brain's ability to block out distractions and stay focused on the task at hand. Okay. So it's ignoring your siblings, ignoring your neighbor, and just getting your work done. Then the composite IQ score is a composite score of all of the core cognitive skills representing overall cognitive ability. So now let's review the Gibson test together. A little bit about the Gibson test. It has the largest normative database of children of any major digital cognitive assessment, and it has been normed twice. It is the only digital cognitive assessment that measures both auditory processing and word attack, which is important to do a reading screening and give you information on reading for your child. This cross-battery approach is preferred by educators. It also has extremely strong psychometric properties, having been validated by 8 sources of validity and reliability. So you can feel good that it measures the skills it states that it measures. And as a bonus, it's been translated into 19 languages. So let's look at the first page of the report, which provides an introduction to the Gibson test. The purpose of the test is not to diagnose or to label. It is intended to indicate relative cognitive skill strengths and weaknesses, to understand a potential reason or cause of a learning problem, to compare changes in cognitive skills over time, to measure the effectiveness of skill intervention, to determine the best intervention to bring weaker skills to productive levels, and to guide future life choices. So I encourage you to read this page fully so you'll understand all of the advantages and supporting details of the test your family has just taken. Now let's turn to the next page in our outcome report. On the top of the second page, you'll find a learning performance history that was filled out by a parent. So if you completed this, if you completed the student questionnaire, you'll see this information filled out. If not, it's going to be blank. Don't worry if you missed it because it does not have any impact on your child's test results. However, it does represent real life according to you. So real life is always more important than test results. However, by looking at real life through a cognitive perspective, we can gain an understanding as to why we may be seeing certain symptoms in life. Okay. So next on that page, you're going to see the learning skills rating scale. Again, this scale was answered by a parent. Areas of concern will be colored yellow, orange, or red. Real life experience with your child is just as important as an objective test, but when both the cognitive skill results and the real life symptoms are in agreement, you can feel good about having an accurate finding. We frequently see that surveys and actual test results are in agreement, but not always. And there are several reasons for that. The test may measure an aspect of cognitive skill that hasn't been applicable to the performance you've seen yet, or they may be motivational and behavioral issues at play. There also may be other factors. So, were they able to hear the instructions? The Gibson test online does not provide an opportunity to ask questions. So, if your child missed the instructions for a subtest, they may not have demonstrated their true ability for that skill. Also, distractions in the room may have been a factor, or the time of day may have affected performance. Did they take the test when they were at their best? Were they alert? This may explain a discrepancy between real life and your students' results. Let's turn to page 3, which shows the test findings in a single chart. So you'll find the test with a short description, and then the first column provides an age equivalency. So for most of us, age equivalent scores are most helpful because they're the easiest thing to understand. For me, they are. Age equivalency scores are given when the tester is under 16. So if your child is 16 or older, you're not going to see this. And the reason is because there's less discrepancy between ages. Like 16, 17, and 18 are very similar in terms of their scalability. So this score is not as reliable as other scores like percentiles and standard scores. The fourth column is the difference between your child's age equivalent score and their actual age. It represents how many years and months over or under the average for their age group they are. We'll see a graph of this in just a minute. The next column is your child's standard score. 100 is average for a standard score, and I'll explain these scores further in just a minute. The final column is your child's percentile rank. The colors correspond with the descriptor of the rank. For example, greens are high, yellows are average, and reds are low. Let me show you what percentile rank looks like with a visual. And also, please note that the composite IQ score is listed at the bottom on this page. To help explain percentiles, this picture represents that. If your child was standing in a line made up of 100 kids, the scores listed in the percentiles column are how your child ranked compared to others their same age. So if your child scored at the 62nd percentile, your child did better than 61 other kids their age. But 39 others that same age scored higher than your child. Every percentile rank always has the same standard score assigned to it. So as you can see, the 50th percentile is the same as a standard score of 100. The fluid IQ score listed on the report is a standard score with the average being 100. So IQ is a composite score of all the tests except the word attack test. It can give you a general idea of someone's cognitive skills, but if someone struggles in different subjects or at different tasks, it's very important to look at each subtest. Someone could actually have a high fluid IQ score, but struggle with different tasks like reading because certain cognitive skills required for reading success are weak. If you turn the page, the next graph is a percentile graph. Scores that fall inside this gray box between the 40th and 60th percentile are considered average on the Gibson test. Just for reference, competitive college admissions typically look for performance at the 75th percentile or higher, shown as the dashed blue line. Statistically, percentiles between the 25th and 75th percentile are considered average, but that's different than how a child is functioning. If a child tests below the 38th percentile, we typically see a struggle in some capacity. Those skills need to be further developed in order for those skills to contribute to learning success. The next page shows a radar graph of your child's strengths. The area that is shaded shows your child's current strengths, and the unshaded areas show areas where they still need to grow. The graph of the next page is a comparison of your child's performance to his same age peers and age equivalents. So the 0 represents your child's exact age, and the bars show the difference in years and months between your child's age and his performance on each skill. Anything below the line would be weak skills in comparison to others your child's age, and anything above the line would be considered an average to strong skill by comparison. If there are bars below the line, those are skills that need further development. So given this information, how do we use it to reach our goals? So I'm sure you're thinking about your student or students, and you have different academic goals that you want for them to achieve. So, first, you need to define the goal and objective for your child, right? Both short and long term goals. And of course, we will make adjustments along our journey, but how will you measure progress towards those goals? So, goals should be measurable. So, for example, maybe you want your child to be able to be more independent with the learning process or to have reduced test anxieties. Are your goals specific to improving reading or math skills? There's also a time factor to consider. So, this becomes important if your student has a learning struggle. This can easily compound year after year if the wrong intervention is applied. So, if your child is struggling with reading and the root cause is an auditory processing weakness, then reading more and just practicing more is not going to help. It's actually going to frustrate them because you must have a plan that addresses the weak auditory processing for reading to get better. If math is hard because maybe their logic is weak, then maybe they're not going to be a rocket scientist where they need a lot of math in their future, but you can remediate logic and reasoning for math. What type of goals do you have for your child beyond high school? Are you looking at trade school, community college, a four-year university? Maybe they're entrepreneurial. Ultimately, as parents, right, we all want to grow independent, fully functioning adults, right? But you have to get to the root cause of what's going on in order to address a challenge. So, testing and then targeting and strengthening the weak skill is what's going to get you the most significant result. Okay, so what if my child does indeed have a weak cognitive skill? Now what? Well, there's three approaches to a struggle. And as adults who are human beings, we all have strengths and weaknesses in our brains as well. So we've all done some of these. So, first, perhaps they can compensate for a weak skill, right? Just try harder. Are they putting forth enough effort? So, spend more time studying, more repetition needed in order to store necessary information. So, this is typical for most of us, even as adults throughout our life. But as long as we can still reach our goal, we're content. That's considered typical. But what if I'm giving something all of my efforts and I don't reach my goal? Well, then I get frustrated and I might quit trying because if I keep trying and don't get anywhere, then what's the point in trying? And that's what we don't want, right? But that is when accommodations can help, right? So homeschooling is set up perfectly for this purpose. You may find you already are doing this for your student. I've listed a few accommodations that are commonly used, but keep in mind accommodations don't address why it's hard. Like you're using them for a reason. And those accommodations tend to follow them through their academic career into college and into life, right? So there's a place for it, compensating and accommodating. But the third choice, which is what I would like to share with you, is to address the root cause of the struggle through changing the weak skill. So you may need to incorporate one, two, or all three of these strategies. It really depends on your student and the significance of their symptoms. It also depends on your goals for them. So for our son, the symptoms were quite evident and were affecting daily life, like for all of us. Daily tears and frustrations and classroom performance was poor, and we had to take action. And we're fortunate to find the root cause of what was going on. Having a cognitive skill baseline assessment is the first step to understanding which skills are weak and how much they need to be strengthened in order to make an impact on learning. Understanding the differences between teaching knowledge versus training skill is important. So, as homeschool parents and educators, we're teaching information. But cognitive skills, in order to change, need to be trained like a muscle in your body. So, yes, our cognitive skills can be improved. So, research has taught us that the brain has a property called neuroplasticity, and this is the brain's ability to change at any age. However, the human brain is complex. Okay. So, as we grow older, it doesn't just spontaneously change with age. That's why we have adults that have learning struggles. Okay. It just doesn't change with age typically. However, the brain can change if you target it and intensely train the skill. As I said, just like a muscle in your body. So if you were going to run a marathon, you would get really serious and you would work out your legs, not your elbow. Okay. Same thing in the brain. If we know which of those skills is weak, we can work them out intensely and strengthen them. But it takes very certain approach. Okay, so what does that mean? Effective training or intense training on the brain? Well, it has to be one-on-one, human delivered, because you have to be able to motivate somebody. How many people have started like a workout routine with a video and then it wanes? So having that live one-on-one human delivered intervention is really important. Also getting immediate feedback. So again, we're not teaching, we're training the brain. So when the brain is making a mistake or an error, we need to correct it immediately and have the right association with the action involved, not the wrong one. So immediate feedback is very different than teaching. We're not waiting for the student to figure out an answer. We're giving them the right answer and moving on and training it to be automatic. Sequenced. It has to be done in the right order. You can't run before you can walk, right? So you have to start with where the student is currently capable and build their skill from there. Loading is critical for a skill to be automatic. So it's the key component for change. So as our brain is trained to do something um, focused, and we add on a secondary mental activity, now we're not thinking about the thing we're doing. Now we're actually multitasking in our brain, and the underlying skill becomes suppressed and automatic. Becomes subconscious. And that's the whole goal here, is for your brain to just automatically respond, not to have to stop and figure it out. So it has to be complex, intense, and targeted. So the brain has more than 90 different cognitive skills. So that's pretty complicated to know exactly what activities to do to target which part of the brain that's weak that requires strengthening. And then, of course, it's really important that it doesn't look and feel like school, that it's non-academic. It's not taught, but trained. We don't want to wear students out, but we do want to make it intense where they work up a mental sweat and feel the change taking place, just like when I asked you to spell Washington backwards. So I hope that this has been really helpful for you to kind of look at your homeschool plan holistically and go from curriculum to what you're working on and what you're prioritizing with your goals and timeline in mind to equip you to make the best decisions for your student going forward. So I want to thank you for watching this educational portion. And finally, you should have received, or you will receive an email following up that has additional resources for you. So we're going to send you a what to look for handout for cognitive skills. So everything I kind of said today is going to be in a handout so you can look for symptoms that might be related. And we'll also send you a free copy of our ebook, Unlock the Einstein book, which includes some brain training activities you can do at home. That's a question I get a lot. What can I do at home? Please read the book. It's all in there and it's free. I'm giving it to you for free. If you still have questions, if you want to talk to me specifically about your student, the QR code on your screen, go ahead and scan that. It's going to take you to my calendar. You can book a private one-on-one session. That is an hour appointment. So we have lots of time to talk. And if you want to prioritize, if you have multiple children you're concerned about, please prioritize one. I prepare for this meeting. I look at your information before we get together, and therefore it is a $59 consultation appointment. But if you have multiple family members that took the test, just prioritize one. And I think as we walk through just one, it's going to be evident for you what applies to your other concerns. But you can have me for an hour. So, again, I want to thank you all so much for participating. I hope you found it valuable, and I wish you all the best. Now the school year is off and running. I hope you all have a really successful year, and I hope to talk to you sometime. Take care.